Hi, everyone. Welcome to KSTP.com and 1500ESPN.com Vikings Sports Wrap. My name is Darren Doogie Wolfson. This is Tom Pelissero, Vikings beat reporter, 1500ESPN.com. Tom, Kevin Williams will miss the first two games. How big a loss is that?
Well, it depends in part on how LaTroy Guion plays. He flashed more than anybody in limited opportunities last season. He's had a really good camp. You look back at the game where they had the goal line stand, 3 out of 4 plays was LaTroy Guion disturbing those plays. And honestly, with Kevin Williams dealing with plantar fasciitis, 2.5 weeks off from football might not be the worst thing for him.
It is weird to think, though, end of last year, Ray Edwards, Jared Allen, Kevin Williams, Pat Williams. Now against San Diego, just Jared Allen remains.
Well, here's the key thing to remember. If there was one unit in which the Vikings were deep last season, it was the defensive line. So even taking Ray Edwards out of it, and I do think it's a drop from Edwards to Brian Robinson, I think that to an extent it's a drop from Pat Williams to Remy Ayadel. Even though it's a younger player, Williams still was able to two-gap and a one-gap scheme because he was so huge and so athletic for a man his size. I think that you could see a bit of a drop-off there. But overall, looking at the entire line, it's not a bad group, and they've still got guys like Everson Griffin and Adrian Owasum and the rookie Christian Ballard who are all going to contribute.
I love the inner football talk. One gap, two gap. All right, over/under 50%. The Vikings are in their nickel defense on Sunday.
Well, I mean, they're going to play a lot of nickel defense. It'll probably be about half the time. I could see them playing some dime. It all depends how the Chargers tend to match up. Now, the Vikings want to be proactive. They want to try to dictate things, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. The defensive side of the ball, we know this scheme. Fred Puckett might empty out and blitz more on third downs, but by and large, you're going to be playing cover 2 against them, and that means you're going to see a lot of Chris Cook on the field, along with Cedric Griffin and Antoine Winfield. I'm also interested to see if they do have to play any dime. Who's the fourth guy out there? Normally it would have been Asher Allen, but at this point Asher's been out with a toe injury for quite a while. I think it's probably Marcus Sherrill's taking over the other slot spot, a guy who at this time last year was not even on a practice squad.
They need to deactivate 7 guys on game day. Marcus Sherrill's being the #1 punt returner. That would make sense. Asher Allen sits, Sherrill's is up.
That gets him up, and I also just look at the way that they want to work the safeties. I know they say they want to have Tyrell Johnson rotate in, but man, so you're going to have 5 safeties active on game day? I just find that hard to believe because I think that they want Mr. Al Raymond, if possible, to be in there on special teams. They absolutely are going to have Eric Frampton in there on special teams. Tyrell doesn't really do much for you on teams, and you also wonder, will Tyrell Johnson have the same sort of letdown he did last year? I talked to him early on in training camp, and he admitted to me that he basically went in the tank for the first half of last season. Just was not able to get himself up to work hard and do the things he had to do to contribute to the team once he lost the starting role. Eventually he was able to get back in, did make 1 start late in the season, but not a guy who's going to run down there and make a ton of plays for you on coverage units. The other guys will.
I'll tell you the matchup that I'm looking forward to watching the most. Antonio Gates against Chad Greenway.
Well, it's Antonio Gates against a lot of people. Could they end up matching up some with Antoine Winfield when he's in the slot and playing the nickel defense? I think you'll see some of that. I think if the Chargers are smart, they'll try to get Antonio Gates matched against Aaron Henderson. When Aaron Henderson's on the field, when you're in the base defense, if they can come up with some different looks, say you're playing 2 tights, and the Vikings are looking at it and playing their base defense against it, which normally is what you would do, you might be able to isolate Gates against Aaron Henderson, or at least make the Vikings have to really banjo back and forth and try to match up, which creates some problems for them. So I could see a scenario in which they end up playing their nickel defense if the Chargers use some 2 tights, because they want to be able to have somebody who's actually going to be able to run with Antonio Gates.
Do you care at all, Tom, about the storyline? Adrian Peterson 4 years ago, 296 yards against the Chargers.
4 years ago, the best running back in football in 2007 was who? Larry Johnson? Priest Holmes? I don't even know. I mean, it was a while ago.
That's why I'm wondering, does the storyline mean anything?
No, I don't think so. I think that it's something nice to talk about, but ultimately there's a lot of different players on both sides. Hey, the Vikings offensive line in 2007, a little different than the Vikings offensive line in 2011.
Yeah, and the 2011 Vikings offensive line clearly not as good, but I'll tell you one key. Steve Hutchinson missed the final 5 games of last year. You talk to enough people, Tom, he is the toughest you-know-what in the National Football League. Even at 34, 35 years old, he can still dominate.
Well, I don't know about dominate. I think that you saw a definite...
You disagree with me?
I disagree with you. I think that...
I'm not sending you that paycheck, Tom.
He's in significant decline at this point. Is he still an above-average guard? Yes, but 2 years in a row he's been nicked up. In 2009 it was the shoulder. Last year he broke a thumb. What you see as guys get older, particularly offensive linemen, there's no other position where you're in a collision, helmet-to-helmet situation every single play. Defensive line, sure, you're doing it, but those guys rotate in and out. Offensive line, it's a ton of collisions, so what you start to see is you see guys wear down. You start to lose your bending ability, and that's something thing that scouts see with Steve Hutchinson is he doesn't bend as well at the knees right now. So sometimes he just gets kind of a thin block, and the defensive lineman's able to throw him. You never saw that happen to Hutch a couple of years ago. Is he still an above-average guard, a starting caliber guard? Yes, but he's not what he was. They need him to be something close to what he was, though, in order for this offensive line to go. I just don't see anybody, in the running game in particular, you're going to see really dominate up front. It's going to have to be a team effort. They're going to go into a power running scheme. They're going to pull the guards a little more. They're not going to the zone blocking. It's going to be a lot of changes. You're going to see the offensive line working differently, the running scheme working differently, but ultimately with Adrian Peterson, now that he doesn't have to hit that aiming point like you do in zone running and try to find that hole, he can just kind of accelerate, look where his blocks are setting. I think it could be beneficial for Adrian Peterson.
You remind me of Bill Walton. I just put the quarter in and you just go. I love it. Who wins and why?
I think it's tough to bet against the Chargers. They're playing at home. I talked to one executive this year who said that, or just this afternoon I talked to an executive who told me that Phillip Rivers looks like he's a man on a mission. Just looks unbelievable, the things he's doing. Yeah, it's preseason, but the way that he's gotten his body in shape, the way that he's kind of taken ownership of it. The Chargers have had this long streak of bad starts, but they're a good team and a talented football team. You got all your weapons. You're not waiting for Vincent Jackson in the holdout this year. I think the Chargers are an awfully dangerous team against the Vikings team that has some questions in the secondary.
Tom will be in San Diego. Be sure to check out his work all week long right here at 1500ESPN.com. Thanks for watching, everybody.